Why mustache? I can't walk out the door or open IG without seeing someone rocking a stache. But how did the face caterpillar crawl its way up from the bottom of the heap to sit pretty on top of everyone's lip? I am about to uncover the biggest conspiracy since finding out who killed women's pockets. Internet, welcome to Style Theory, the show that's still waiting for puberty to hit so they can finally grow facial hair. It's gonna happen, chat, I believe. To soothe my sadness at my own lack of facial hair, I've taken to admiring others. And lately, I've been seeing a specific trend taking root on many people's upper lip. The mustache. Thick or thin, horseshoe or chevron, it is back and in a big way. But why? How has the mustache returned from the dead after so many years? The truth is, it's a miracle that the mustache even exists today. It should be extinct. No, really, it should be extinct. Things have been trying to take out the mustache for hundreds of years. So, how has this hairy handlebar been able to survive and thrive despite the attempts on its life? To figure out why mustaches are once again at the top of the fashion pyramid, we have to take a look at what nearly killed it in the first place, and what may have just saved its life for good. Facial hair has always been a thing, even as far back as the prehistoric age. More hair on your face keeps your face warm in the winter and keeps the sun from burning you to a crisp in the summer. Pretty genius. As time went on, facial hair came to mean many things to many different cultures. The oldest recording mustache was this statue of a Gaul circa 400 AD. According to some historians, it was a symbol of their nobility. This is a common thread throughout history. For many, it was a symbol of power, so much so that it was even depicted on some armors, like the Sutton Hoo helmet from England. That is one heavy-duty stache, my dude. Nobles and royalty would continue to showcase their mustaches over centuries, but they didn't hold a candle to the other major player in the game, the military mustache. The origins of the military mustache is a little hazy. Depending on the source, you can either trace it back to 18th century Hungary, where soldiers would wear mustaches as part of their uniforms, believing that it helped to intimidate their enemies. On the other hand, some attribute it to 18th century France and Napoleon's old guard, who wore mustaches to intimidate their enemies. Mustaches must have been like super scary back then. Ooh, scary mustache. Either way, this inspired many others to do the same, most notably the British Army. From 1860 to 1916, soldiers in the British Army were required by law to trim their facial hair into a mustache. This made it really easy to spot the difference between a civilian and a soldier. Just take a gander at their upper lip. The law stayed in effect until World War I, where the stache was dealt its first blow: chemical warfare. This new style of war meant that soldiers needed to wear gas masks onto the battlefield for safety. As many of us learned during the height of COVID, masks and facial hair are not necessarily, besties. Mustaches, especially the large, show-stopping ones favorite at the time, hindered the gas masks from doing their jobs and put the soldiers' lives at risk. So, for their safety, the law was repealed. A soldier could still support a stache if they wanted, but it could not interfere with safety protocols. But that was just the first blow. What truly sent the military mustache to the shadow realm came 2 decades and 1 world war later. You may be able to see where this is going. World War II changed the world in many ways, but one that most don't realize is how it nearly made the mustache a symbol of wartime horror. At the time, the mustache was a symbol of masculine power, one that many people of political notoriety chose to wear. President Theodore Roosevelt wore this big bushy style during most of his political career, much like his successor, President Taft. But this wasn't what sealed the mustache-shaped coffin. For that, we need to take a look at the other side of the war and the 3 nails that almost shut that coffin for good. Nail number 1, Emperor Hirohito, who authorized the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Nail number 2, Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union. And the final nail, Adolf Hitler. His face was a symbol of fear. By the end of World War II in 1945, the mustache was all but dead and buried thanks to this association. There are few things that could bring a trend back from the dead and give it such a strong rebrand that its complicated history couldn't keep it down. You'd have to be some kind of PR mastermind to do that. Lucky for the mustache, Hollywood was ready and willing to give it a new life. The mustache started to soft launch its new rebrand towards the end of the 1960s when it popped back up in two notable instances. A western called Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid starring an up-and-coming actor named Robert Redford, and on the cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album. Both were major pop culture moments of the time. But while those mustaches certainly made a statement, they weren't enough to cement the stache as a household staple. It may have had something to do with the fact that Robert Redford famously said that he grew the stache to make himself less handsome. Not exactly a big sell for your average guy to pop one on and hit the town. That moment wouldn't come until the 1980s. When you ask someone to name an iconic mustache, there is one that usually tops the list: Tom Selleck. Yeah, I'm sorry, Burt Reynolds. You tried, but you couldn't beat the impact of Mr. Magnum P.I. When Selleck popped up on TV screens sporting Hawaiian shirts, short shorts, and a mustache that wouldn't quit, it hit different. The show brought the stache into the everyday American's home. This particular style was known as the chevron, though most people probably know it by a different name that I can't say in fear of YouTube demonetizing this video. Let's just say it rhymes with corn stache. Anyway, Selleck, or rather his character Magnum, represented the ideal masculinity of the era. Strong, capable, and charismatic. This mustache inspired a generation of men to think that they too could pull off a mustache, including my dad. Those family photos haunt me. My personal trauma aside, bringing the stache into the home of the everyman meant that suddenly every guy was sporting a Tom Selleck-inspired lip caterpillar. And instead of letting it fade away, the 80s doubled down on the mustache. They leaned in to the lip hair, and it all came to a head with the release of a little movie called Top Gun. Yeah, the mustache can't seem to escape the military. While the movie's leading man Tom Cruise kept a bare face, it was his co-star that really stole the scene with his stache. Goose, the best friend of Tom Cruise's Maverick, is known for his iconic mustache. It was his character's legacy, though more on that in a moment. All of this meant that the stache was at the top of its game, ruling the small screen and the box office. But it couldn't last forever. While it did stick around in some subcultures, the mustache was becoming a symbol of the establishment, something that the rising anti-establishment culture of the 90s wanted nothing to do with its links to the military and other similar types of authority. Instead, you saw a growing love of alternative and punk culture, which brought with it clean-shaven faces and more experimental types of facial hair like the goatee and soul patches. Mustaches were for the man, not the men. The mustache fell out of popular style for the next 2 decades, until the late aughts and early 2010s, when it was suddenly back with a vengeance. Though not how you might expect. It wasn't popular for being high fashion, it was popular for being funny. Or as they said back in the day, for the lulz. This was in large part thanks to the rise of a growing subculture known as hipsters. Though the name originally came from the jazz movement of the 1940s, in the 2000s, the name was co-opted for a new group. One that loved coffee, plaid, and thick-rimmed Buddy Holly glasses. Seeing a hipster in real life was like seeing your Tumblr dashboard come to life. While nowadays they mostly exist in memes, at the time it was one of the largest growing groups out there. To be a hipster was to strive to be the opposite of cool and mainstream, rejecting the styles of the time and embracing trends that fell outside of popular culture. They were so hip that they listened to music that no one had heard of and wore things that were meant to make them appear so ahead of the fashion curve that if you weren't in on it, you just didn't get it. Why did they do this? It wasn't to bring attention to underrated music or fashion, or to try and promote positive change to the culture. The goal was to be ironic. The basic idea was that by doing or wearing something that was funny or ugly, they were, well, cooler than you. I'll let you decide if you agree in the comments. This idea also applied to the facial hair that they sported, with big beards and, you guessed it, the mustache being among the most popular. Just so we're clear, I'm not calling beards and mustaches ugly. The hipsters kinda did, until they made it so popular that it wasn't. The problem with wearing things ironically is that eventually the irony wears off, and all that's left is a trend that starts to take its root in the last place that the hipsters want, the mainstream. By the 2010s, the mustache wasn't just a thing you found on someone's face, it was everywhere. Shirts, wallets, jewelry, your dog, you name it, someone put a mustache on it. I bet you if you clicked the subscribe button right now, you'd see a mustache appear. Go on, try it. Click it. Ooh, look at that stache. So luscious, so shapely. Looking sharp there, buddy. This trend was so ingrained into early 2010s pop culture that people were even tattooing mustaches on their fingers. Nothing better than being able to pop on a quick finger stache anytime that you need it, right? I kid, but if you happen to have one of those ironic mustache tats, let me know in the comments below how you feel about it now. I'm really curious. Now, I'm giving a lot of credit to hipsters here for being the sole reason mustaches took over the millennial era. But there was one other thing that helped catapult mustaches to a height it had never seen before. Movember. Movember is a fundraising event where people grow mustaches in November to raise awareness for men's health. This event started in 2004 with a group of 30 friends in Australia deciding to bring back the stache for charity. And it took the world by storm. By 2007, it was global and it was considered an official charity. Movember reached its peak participation in 2012. It had 1.1 million registered participants and it raised $95 million. That is an amazing feat. So why don't we hear about it anymore? Looking at Google Trends, post-November of 2012, you see the interest in mustaches take a steep dive, only peaking again in November of 2013 for the next Movember. Why? When a trend reaches that level of overexposure, it can go from being the peak of culture to being out of touch with the flip of a switch. In fact, this moment, the 2012 death of the mustache, is arguably the birth of what we today call millennial cringe. Yes, cringe killed the mustache, and we all know there's no coming back from a cringe death. 3 strikes, you're out, right? Wrong. You see, there was still one thing left. One thing so powerful that it could bring the mustache back to life after everything, like some sort of hairy fashion zombie. What could possibly have the power to bring something back from a cringe-induced death? Gen Z. You heard me right. The generation that created the term millennial cringe actually saved one of the most millennial trends from the brink of extinction by accident. Oops. The 2020s have seen a new wave of 80s nostalgia take hold of pop culture, specifically with Gen Z. Stranger Things and Kate Bush, Fleetwood Mac going viral on TikTok, all of it's played into this new nostalgia for a time where things appeared simpler, and the digital treadmill of staying relevant on social media didn't exist. For a generation that grew up online, that was a breath of fresh air. Like we talked about in our Why Does Gen Z Look Old video, they are shopping vintage and upcycling items from their parents' and their grandparents' closets. This love and access to old school fashion, along with this new wave of 80s nostalgia, means that trends like oversized blazers, neon-colored makeup, and even mullets are making a comeback. As someone who's been watching this video and paying close attention, do you remember what else was incredibly popular in the 80s? Say it with me. 1, 2, 3, mustaches! Good job, chat. In 2022's Top Gun Maverick, a sequel to the 80s film that we mentioned earlier, actor Miles Teller sported a mustache as a nod to his character's father, Goose. Yep, the legacy of Mr. Air Force Mustache lives on. The internet exploded. Fan cams were made, people were shaving off their beards in droves, and Gen Z fell in love not just with Miles Teller's mustache, but all the ways that they could create their own unique looks using facial hair. More than any other generation, Gen Z has embraced the idea of personal identity and exploring how to take trends and make those trends fit them, rather than the other way around. If you don't believe me, believe the data. In 2020, the razor company Gillette created a whole new line centered around beard and mustache maintenance after seeing such a large decline in razor sales post-quarantine. They estimated that as of September 2022, at least 9.6% of men in the US were embracing the mustache. During last year's London Fashion Week, another shaving brand called Braun was brought in specifically to style mustaches that were going to be walking down the runway. Gen Z isn't alone either, with many millennials following their lead and also jumping aboard the hairy mustache-themed train. Though not everyone is happy that they're back, there are plenty of people out there spreading an anti-mustache agenda. But will they win, or will the stache finally stick around for the long haul? With the oldest of Gen Alpha just hitting the cusp of puberty, puberty, we'll have to wait and see if they too embrace the look or deem it a little too old school. Or maybe Top Gun 3 will come out in 10 years and secure the mustache's place in our hearts and on our faces. But hey, that's just a theory. A style theory. Keep looking sharp. Want to learn the best way to shave your face to maintain that mustache? Click the box on the screen now to find out.